So what are the major differences between glassmaking now versus glassmaking back then?
The process has been refined for industry. In the early days, color wasn't an issue. What the settlers needed as they were building and moving across country was they needed containers, bottles of all sites, and they also needed window glass. So that's what all the early shops, including Batsto, were involved with doing and making. As the industry grew and developed, the consumers started wanting a better quality of glass, so they started refining it. Like they would heat the sand and demagnetize it to take the iron out. It would make a cleaner glass. Or they might add a little pinch of some metal oxides like either cobalt or manganese to it to act as a decolorizer for these industries. As glass became more and more of an object that was needed for our society, industry started bringing in engineers, and engineers started refining the quality of glass and the different colors of glass that were available. A good example is when I started here in 1977, Wheaton Industries across the street were making glass predominantly for either the scientific community or the cosmetic community. You know, and that was allspice, which were white glass, you know, the old Vicks bottles, which was the cobalt blue glass. So if a customer came to them and they wanted something specific, the engineers could develop the formula, give it to them, and go about getting the orders that they needed.
Okay. And what kind of equipment is used now compared to the equipment used back then?
The general process hasn't changed, but the materials that make up the liner of the furnace today, in the old days they used to use clay. It worked well, but it wore out very fast. Today we have materials that are supercharged at like 3,500 degrees, makes them very, very dense, high aluminum products that resist the wear of the glass, so that the furnaces, once they're up and running, they can run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now across the street where industries used to be, there's still a few local industries in town, and up in Violin, they have furnaces that are 50 tons. That pull maybe 20 tons of glass a day, where in the old days they probably had 300, 400, 500 pound tanks, maybe 1,000 pound tanks, and they would drain them every day and they would remelt them every night. And also, instead of using wood today around the turn of the century, they started using fuel oil, and today we use natural gas and forced air. Much cleaner, much easier to control. We have computers on our furnaces that we program, and once we find out a cycle that works for the glass to get a clean melt, as long as you do the same thing to it each time, you're going to get the same results.
Interesting. My next question, Jesse Richards used a cylinder method for manufacturing glass versus crown glass. What are the difference between the two?
The cylinder method would have been probably incorporated the use of blowing molds to make large cylinders of glass, diameter, whatever, and then they would open at both ends, and they would cut it down the middle, and then they would reheat it and slump it. So you may end up with what happened was they ended up getting larger pieces of window glass to use, because the demand for that was becoming more important as, you know, more storefronts and stuff wanted the customers to see more. Out on the floor today, we're making the old-fashioned crown glass, where we blow glass and kind of shape it into an oval bowl. We heat it up, we flare it out, and you get a flat piece of round glass that then we put a template on, and we can cut it into either squares or triangles. And in the center of that piece of glass, you're going to see a little raised crown where it was attached to a rod, which is how it got the name, crown glass.
Interesting. Now, how did the glass industry affect the economy back in the 19th century? How did it impact the job market?
It was, for a long period of time, it was probably the #1 employer in the state of New Jersey. At one point, I believe there was 106 working hand glass factories around the state of New Jersey. This is before automation came in, where everything was still being done by hand. There was a huge demand for it. You figure by the 1890s, the settlers have been moving steadily further to the west. As the population expanded, more people built houses. There was more need for window glass. There was more need for containers, and the workplace marketplace for it expanded to accommodate that. It wasn't until maybe the late 1890s, early 1903 or whatever, where the first automatic bottle blowing machines were invented that eventually put all these people out of business.
Now, with such a high demand back then, what kind of like competitors and obstacles would glass industry?
I think the competitors wasn't that big of a deal because demand, I believe, outweighed the amount of the quantity of glass that society needed. The obstacles were having the men on your team that understood the needs, the formulas for melting the glass, understanding the impact of harvesting the forest and making sure you replanted it so that in a 20-year cycle you can go back to where you started and have more fuel, because if not, they would have probably decimated entire South Jersey from one coast to the other. Because when they were melting in the glass, they needed to keep that fire stoked in the furnaces at about 2,500 degrees, and they had to do it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the entire time that furnace was running. So you can imagine the huge draw it would have been on wood from the forest.
And my last question, what events were going on during this upcoming glass industry? Did that affect it at all?
I think the events, the big events in change was like I mentioned earlier, the invention of the automatic bottle blowing machine. A team of glass blowers gathering out of the tank on a pipe. Maybe they could do 40 bottles an hour. These machines are capable of doing thousands of bottles an hour. Mm-hmm. So number one, it displaced all these people in the hand skills. Now a lot of them were able to get employed and get retrained to work in the mold shop, the model shop, because in order to make bottles and molds, you needed to make the molds. You needed to make the models, and these guys understood the process of glass, so they would understand how the glass would move, which allowed them to make these decisions. And eventually, in today, I guess 1920s, 30s, Millville, South Jersey became the largest producer of glass in the world, supplying the whole world until they started sharing that technology with, foreign competitors.
Well, thank you, Don, for
Sure.
for your time.
I hope you got the information you wanted. I suggest you watch these guys go out and make these rondelles. I can even show you a template where they have where they cut. I can even show you a window they made with them out there right now. You can take a picture of this and put it on top of it. And then you can go over to the museum and start at the beginning and work your way around, and you'll be able to see the progression of how it was, how glass influenced just even the making of what was made, and a lot of it was determined by what society needed. Pretty interesting.
Yeah. Awesome, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
So right now we're going to look at the process of glass making.
What's the Zoom button? This?